And as you can see here, of course, I own my favorite seasons of Dexter on DVD, going from 1 till 4.
No! God, please, no!
Dexter Morgan is a forensic technician specializing in bloodstain pattern analysis for the Miami Metro PD. He leads a secret parallel life as a vigilante serial killer, hunting down murderers who have not been adequately punished by the justice system due to corruption or legal technicalities. Today we're going to be looking at Dexter, we're going to be looking at all the previous seasons as well as the new one which is coming out in just a couple of days. Dexter is based on a series of novels written by Jeff Lindsay. I actually read the first one and I really enjoyed it because it really shows how the creators managed to find the perfect tone for this series. And it kind of follows the same tone as a play where we've got an unreliable narrator which kind of turns around and looks at the camera and tells us there is something completely wrong going on right now.
He's recreating my past with Tony Tucci's body parts. He's forcing me to see this.
It was an incredibly successful series back then, but it of course had a lot of up and down, and the quality kind of changed drastically from one season to the next. The tone of course was very funny, very dark and kind of absurd, and it didn't resemble any of the other cop shows that were being produced back then.
Yell all you want, no one's gonna hear you. Feels good.
Of course, it was following that kind of weird anti-hero trend that we had going on in those days with Tony Soprano, for example, or even Walter White as Eisenberg in Breaking Bad. But this was actually, for me, the first time that I encountered a series which focused on a serial killer, which wasn't portraying him necessarily as a completely bad person.
What you did when you were her age.
I killed the neighbor's dog.
Well, don't tell her that.
And Dexter definitely played a big part when it came to injecting new life in the serial killer renaissance. Because before him, the approach that we had when it comes to portraying serial killers was really based on true crime and people like Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy. And when it comes to films, we had the serial killers like Hannibal Lecter from Silence of the Lambs or Patrick Bateman from American Psycho.
You use Evian skin cream. And sometimes you wear lead at home. But not today.
Those were the kind of ways of portraying serial killers, and Dexter of course injected something completely new within the genre itself. I stumbled on a new podcast called Dexter New Blood Wrap Up with Scott Reynolds, and I listened to all of the episodes and I managed to find some interesting things when it comes to what happened in the writing room and of course what happened with that blasphemous ending that nobody liked. The writers came in because they were intrigued by the comedic aspect, Dexter's honesty and a level of intimacy and relatability that you didn't even know was possible. They went in not wanting to make a cop show, and that's exactly why I enjoyed it, because I wasn't really a big fan of traditional cop shows. And they didn't really do a lot of research around the topic of serial killers at the beginning. At the end of the day, this was a story about a monster becoming human, someone who learns how to feel emotions by hanging out with the most inhumane people. Across his journey, Dexter was trying to come out of isolation, heal his past trauma. In a way, even though Dexter looked and claimed to be free, he was always stuck in that container where his mother was murdered.
Close your eyes. Don't look. Don't Dexter. Close your eyes. Loves you, Dexter. Mommy loves you, Dexter.
The writers were talking about the fact how his homicidal tendencies were completely relatable because he kind of touched on our idea of necessary justice and our need of perpetrators being actually put beyond the bars and perpetrators being punished for what they did, which wasn't necessarily true in real life, of course. When it comes to the ending of the series, in the podcast they said something quite interesting that I really didn't think about back then, and that is the fact that a true psychopath would have never actually left Miami. Miami because he would never have felt responsible for any of the things that happened to the people around him, right? And I thought that was an interesting take, but we will dive deep into the Dexter finale quite soon. First of all, I actually want to do a wrap up of the entire series for you so that we can all be up to speed, because even though I'm a huge Dexter fan and I watch the first few seasons quite often, and of course I've had repeated viewings of them, I don't really remember what happens after season 5 basically, so I wanted to look into that. And now I will have to go into something that I hate the most, which is literally just reading synopsis. And I hope that you will stick around with me during this wrap up. But if you remember exactly what happened in Dexter in all the 8 seasons, you can skip this part and jump straight ahead to my impressions on the trailers of Dexter New Blood and on the future of Dexter. In the first season, Dexter faces the eye-struck killer who targets prostitutes and leaves their bodies severed and bloodless. Fact that Dexter finds incredibly fascinating, of course. In this season, we learn of Harry Morgan's code, which has allowed Dexter to lose himself in his serial killing desires without getting caught. Rudy, aka the eye-struck killer, is revealed to be Dexter's older brother. Dexter eventually kills him to stop him from endangering his sister, Deborah. In the second season, Dexter's victims are uncovered and an investigation is launched in Dexter's own department to find the killer, dubbed the Bay Harbor Butcher. During this time, Deborah struggles to recover after surviving the eye-struck killer's attempts to murder her. Dokes gets increasingly suspicious of Dexter, but Dexter is too clever and actually manages to frame him as the killer. Dexter starts dating Lila, who is a bit of a crazy pyromaniac who ends up killing Dokes to protect Dexter, but she also ends up kidnapping Rita's children and almost setting fire to them. But Dexter is once again way too clever and manages to save everyone while also killing Lila in Paris. In the third season, Dexter kills a man in self-defense and initiates a friendship with the man's brother, Assistant District Attorney Miguel Prado. Dexter also starts initiating him to Harry's code so that they could one day work and kill together. But at the end of the day, Miguel is actually manipulating him and killing whoever he wants despite Dexter's teachings. In the meantime, Rita discovers that she's pregnant and Deborah investigates the murders of a new serial killer called the Skinner, hoping to gain a promotion to detective. Miguel frees the Skinner, asking him to kill Dexter. Dexter kills Miguel, kills the Skinner as well, and attends his own wedding to get his happily ever after with Rita. Season 3 is actually one of my least favorite seasons, mostly because it's quite slow. Of course, I'm also avoiding going into relationship details because it's not really that important. Season 4 is by far the best season of Dexter. The Trinity Killer, believed to be an older Caucasian man, kills 3 people in the same city roughly once each year, and in a specific sequence: one young woman killed in a bathtub, a mother killed by falling, and a father bludgeoned. Dexter slowly finds out that the Trinity Killer is Arthur Mitchell, husband, father, deacon at a local church, and leader of the Four Walls One Heart home-building charity organization. Dexter continues to watch him and comes to admire his ability to balance his killings along with his family and work lives. All of this is of course a lie, because Arthur is actually an abusive asshole, and Dexter begins to make plans to kill him. Dexter eventually kills the Trinity Killer. After disposing of the evidence, Dexter returns home and finds a voicemail from Rita. He proceeds to call her back, but is surprised to hear a phone ringing in the house. Hearing baby Harrison's cries, he races to the bathroom to find Arthur's last victim, Rita, dead in the bathtub, and Harrison bowling in the pool of blood on the floor. I will allow you to take a small break to cry right now, because I will admit that this was one of the most shocking revelations and twist endings that I've ever seen in any series before. Season 5 is definitely not as strong as Season 4 because Dexter has come to terms with the aftermath of the Season 4 finale. And he basically is trying to convince himself that he can protect other people, he can be this Avenger kind of savior, and that's when he stumbles on the character of Lumen, who he eventually falls in love with. Quinn tries to make sense of the Trinity Killer disappearance and suspects Dexter, while Dexter stops a group of serial rapists who are actually linked to the character I was talking about before, Lumen. In the 6th season, a new threat appears in Miami in the form of the Doomsday Killer, killer, Professor James Geller and his student Travis Marshall, who seek to bring about the end of the world through killings based on the Book of Revelation. And they do that by leaving signs of the apocalypse, including the Alpha and the Omega, or the Four Horsemen, as cryptic tableau at each crime scene. Of course, as you can imagine, Dexter manages to find and kill the killer, but plot twist, Deborah walks in on him just as he plunges a knife into Travis' chest, to which Dexter responds,
Oh God.
Season 7 and 8 are actually a bit of a blank for me, just because this was the moment when I started not really enjoying where the series was going when it came to its writing. Once again, someone at the police station suspects Dexter and is trying to frame him, and this time it's Lagerta. But Deborah and Dexter actually kill her together. Across the 7th season, there is another killer and a potentially love interest for Dexter called Hannah, but there is nothing really else iconic that is going on here. Season 8 follows Dexter, who is forced to deal with his past when he comes across Dr. Evelyn Vogel, an expert on psychiatry who returns to Miami. Nicknamed the Psychopath's Whisperer, she claims to have structured the code for him alongside Harry. This season also deals with a new serial killer in Miami who removes pieces of the victim's brains, and with Deborah, who is trying to deal with her action in the previous seasons. Dexter finds DNA evidence and learns that the brain surgeon is Vogel's psychotic son, who faked his own death years ago and changed his identity to that of a dead man, Oliver Saxon. Dexter captures Saxon, but realizes that he no longer has murderous urges in response to his relationship with Hannah. Instead of killing Saxon, Dexter calls Deborah to arrest him, but Saxon shoots Deborah, who eventually suffers a massive stroke which leaves her brain dead at the hospital. Dexter meets Saxon in his cell and provokes him to stab him with a pen, and after that Dexter retaliates and kills him by puncturing his carotid artery. Everyone starts suspecting Dexter for a lot of shit, and at the end of the day he disappears, driving into the sunset towards a storm. He disposes of his sister's body as well, tying up all the different loose ends, and cut to black.
I was just kidding! Come on! Come on! You guys know I was just kidding, right?
Dexter is actually revealed to have faked his own death and is now living under an assumed identity working for a lumber company in Oregon. And he looks really sad. So that's it, we're actually all caught up, and we're gonna actually start talking about Season 8, Episode 12, Remember the Monsters, which is the final episode of Dexter, which a lot of people hated, me included of course. Phillips recognized that the ending had suited the time when it was broadcast, as around 2013. There were a number of real-life serial killers known to be living in Oregon and nearby states, and Phillips also considered that by surrounding himself with chainsaws, Dexter was under a constant reminder about his mother had died. To be honest, that's the most lazy and stupid reason that I've ever heard, but I'm glad to hear that across different interviews, Michael C. Hall as well, he kind of talked about his disappointment for how the season ended and what it did to Dexter as a character. I totally get people's dissatisfaction with the way the show ended, because it didn't really end, it just left us in this pretty unresolved, funny certain place, and while I thought that it made sense for the character to find himself in that position, and to put himself in that self-imposed exile, after all the chaos after the show, I would get why it was pretty unsatisfying and infuriating for the fans. In my opinion though, Dexter's finale and the final episode don't really have to do anything about the fact that the end of Dexter felt so unnerving, felt so incredibly boring, and I feel like that's because for me Dexter should have ended around season 5, so after Rita's death. And actually if you think about it, you could literally copy and paste the ending that we got in season 8. You could have put it 3 seasons before and it would have worked exactly the same. And it's kind of stupid when you think about it, and it kind of shows how not only that ending would have fit at any point in time, but also the fact that along those 3 different seasons there was not a lot of things happening and they could have literally been cut out of existence.
Hey Dex, you dropped something!
You need to be more careful, Dexter. Use my magic code. I decided that I hate you now.
But I'm a friendly ghost! I mean, Deb falling in love with Dexter was something that was completely unnecessary and completely creepy, in my opinion. The final killer, the brain surgeon, was so incredibly forgettable, but honestly, most of the killers in the last 2 seasons were completely forgettable. Also, there's the fact that the writers keep reusing the trope of someone is trying to frame Dexter. Is Dexter actually gonna get caught by the FBI? And for them to finally find some weird twisty ending so that everything kind of ties itself together so that he doesn't get caught. And I feel like the worst thing is that they used that trope so many different times, it started becoming quite stale by the last season. But also the fact that all the people who were trying to frame him, all the people who were actually trying to unmask him as the serial killer that he was, were innocent people most of the times. If you think about Dokes or if you think about La Guerta as well.
You shouldn't be here. The only way to end this.
No, I can't let you go through with this. She didn't have. You're a good person. You're not like.
Do what you gotta do.
If he had to kill them, if he had to make that choice, it would have been so much more interesting for his character development. But at the end of the day, the writers always managed to find another interesting ethical way for Dexter to actually win against everyone, so that he wouldn't have to break Harry's code and he wouldn't have to make any choice at the end of the day, you know? Because you had the feeling that the writers were really committed to us falling in love with Dexter and not being against him in any way whatsoever across the entire series. And it's a bit of a shame, I think, because he is a very despicable character on paper. And if you want to compare that to the excellent writing that was done on Breaking Bad when it came to the dichotomy of Walter White and Heisenberg, then you can definitely see how they could have managed to actually create a anti-hero protagonist who was both good and bad at different times of his life. But at the end of the day, this series was so committed to trying to give excuses to Dexter, to try to absolve him from all the crimes that he did, something that actually Deb does in the last episode, where he literally says, you don't need to feel guilty for your crimes, which is incredibly stupid. At the end of the day, it took away a lot of the interesting things about Dexter as a character. I mean, I still remember when I was watching the finale and I was seeing the scene of him driving towards the throne with his boat, and I thought it looked incredibly ridiculous, and I have no idea how anyone could have taken that finale seriously. And if we jump back then to the revelation that he's actually faked his death, you could argue around that as much as you want, but at the end of the day, that's the most serial killer choice ever, to actually fake your death and to move to another area, create a new identity and to start all over again, maybe killing more people, right?
Deborah, are you okay?
The choice that he makes at the end of the day is the one of a very traditional serial killer. Even though we've spent literally 8 seasons trying to redeem this person as much as possible to make sure that he becomes a human. But I feel like the ending that they provided to us didn't answer any of the interesting questions that were put up in these 8 seasons. And they kind of left us wondering whether did he learn anything from this journey, or maybe he didn't learn anything at all and the cycle is about to restart all over again.
I might still be a monster, but I'm an evolving monster.
So what do we know about Dexter's new blood? Of course, I was trying to scavenge along the internet for the different types of news about this series, and I wanted to deliver everything to you, as well as my critique of the trailer and the different images and the casting choices, of course. I think the biggest difference was the fundamental differences that in these 8 years or near decade since we left him. He hasn't killed anybody. He has been abstinent. He's been dedicated to this sober life and has managed it in a very isolated way. He's a guy who is dead to himself as far as he is concerned. But as you can imagine, the cameras are turning back on, probably because he's going to come back to life.
Is this a new beginning? Or the beginning of the end?
No, what is happening?
Dexter New Blood is set 10 years after Dexter disappeared during the events of the Hurricane Laura. He is now living in a small city as a shopkeeper under the new identity of Jim Lindsay. He has developed a relationship with Angela Bishop, the town's chief of police, and seems to have suppressed most of his killings urges across the years. But something seems to be happening in this small town, and Dexter fears that the Dark Passenger might be coming back. Jennifer Carpenter is of course coming back playing Deborah, so Dexter's sister, and we don't really know if she's coming back through flashbacks or through ghost apparitions. Oh wait a minute, yes we do know, because we actually saw the trailers, and in the trailers it shows that Deborah is talking to Dexter, kind of representing his conscience if I'm not mistaken, and telling him that he needs to be careful and he needs to learn from his mistakes. But I hope that we kind of get a couple of flashbacks, you know, maybe they could actually fix some of the weird and awkward stuff from the previous seasons, you know. Jack Alcott is playing Harrison Morgan, who is Dexter's son, who is now a teenager. And actually I found some pictures portraying him and Dexter together in the woods, and those pictures seem to be taken from the second episode of the show, which means that everything that we saw in the trailer itself is supposed to be happening approximately in the first episode. So my idea is that Harrison is gonna burst into Dexter's life in the first episode, and in the second episode they're already together, maybe with this new investigation going on. I'm kind of glad that Harrison is not a ghost as well, because otherwise it would have been way many too winks to the past without having actually something tangible. So it's kind of cool that they decided to include him in the story.
Whoa, easy there. What is the problem? I kind of have a thing about blood.
John Lithgow joined the cast as well, and he used to play the Trinity Killer. And once again, we don't know if it's gonna be through flashbacks or ghost apparitions, but I'm pretty sure that it's gonna be mostly ghost apparitions, because it would be way too painful to go back to those memories of the Trinity Killer.
You can't control the demon inside of you any more than I could control mine.
4 episodes have official titles for now. The first one being Cold Snap, followed by Storm of Fuck, Smoke Signals, and H is for Hero. And all will be directed by Marco Siega, who directed a lot of episodes of Dexter, and also a lot of episodes of You. And actually, if you like You, it's probably thanks to him. I definitely don't want this season to be about Dexter crying all over his past and reminiscing about his bad decisions back then. I feel like there are way too many revival seasons that do that. They just deliver on nostalgia, and they kind of lead us to believe that in 10 years, 20 years, if not even in 30 years, that our characters have remained the same, that nothing has really changed, because as we know in real life, that's really not what happens, you know? So I really hope that this new limited season will have interesting things to do, and by looking at the trailer, I have high hopes for this season. And Philip himself said that this is definitely not a 9th season. This is something completely different, because the writers themselves, they actually worked backwards. They wrote the final ending of Dexter New Blood, and then they wrote retroactively all the different episodes that would lead to this final death. And I was really glad to find out in an interview that he said that the ending of this one will be stunning, shocking, surprising, unexpected. And without jinxing anything, I will say that the ending of this new season that we're doing will blow up the internet. When it comes to the trailer itself, I really enjoy seeing Dexter in a completely different environment. This made me realize actually how much I was bored of seeing Dexter in the old Miami kind of look and feel, especially because, as we know, that is not really Miami, because the entire show of Dexter was shot in LA in a studio pretending to be Miami. So of course by the end of the 8th season it kind of started looking very fake and plastic-like. It kind of started looking very lifeless, and I'm really glad that we're exploring something new, and I feel like they should have definitely explored something new much earlier in the Dexter storyline. When it comes to the trailer, we've shown that we've got some missing people going on. We got no bodies, no possible pattern in between all the different killings, and it seems like Dexter is starting his own investigation, trying to find out who he's actually doing these killings, and that's probably why the Dark Passenger is coming out to play again.
Go Hawks!
It also seems like Deborah is helping him out in the investigation, which is kind of a cute thing to do. We also see that there is a person escaping from a cabin, and we see a masked killer preparing to shoot at that person. It's 100% sure that that is not Dexter, just because, as we know, he doesn't really use pistols and guns. It's not really his way. But something that I don't really like about this trailer is that it seems to be showing a serial killer that doesn't want to be found, that doesn't want to be caught, and that doesn't really follow the Dexter history of killers who create a spectacle of their murders. And those killers tend to be the most interesting ones, instead of what we're getting from this trailer that seems to be just a very traditional serial killer who kills and disposes of their victims as fast as possible. I really hope that it's not the case, just because I don't want this season to be very mundane. I want it to feel special. I want it to feel like Dexter. I really hope that they learned a couple of things from Hannibal as well, and that this series doesn't only have the perfect Dexter tone, but that it looks beautiful. And that it looks different from what we've seen before, and it doesn't just rehash the kind of style that we're used to as fans of the series. It kind of seems like this season is gonna be a lot about answering the question that was raised in the finale of Dexter, and which is, has Dexter actually learned anything from what happened across the 8 seasons that we saw in the past?
You are a serial killer. You love that you're getting away with murder and you cannot wait to kill again. Have you learned nothing?
I'm not entirely sure whether they'll actually be able to fix all the mistakes that were laid out in 3 seasons worth of Dexter, but I am still intrigued on what's going on, and I really hope that in 10 episodes they manage to tell a coherent and well-structured story that takes us through an emotional journey. I really hope that you liked this video. I'm sorry that it was this long, but of course we had a lot of things to go through, and I really hope that if you are a Dexter fan, you stuck with me until the very end of the video. Let me know if you like Dexter, if you're still interested about this new season, and what was your favorite season, for example, of the original Dexter. Let me know down in the comments, because I really would like to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because it always helps. I'm Patrick, and this is Torn Apart.
Say it again, Dexter.
Tonight's the night. Has to happen.